Siumovoseroku. 22. Succulents. Nature's desert camels explained. Have you ever stood in the garden aisle of a Home Depot or Lowe's, staring at those perfectly arranged rows of succulents and thought, this time, I'm going to keep them alive? I've been there. In fact, I've been there more times than I care to admit. I used to see these plants, the echeverias that look like stone roses, the plump little beans of a sedum, and think they were basically invincible. They look like they are made of rubber, right? So, I'd buy a flat of them, bring them home to my porch, and treat them just like my petunias or my ferns. I'd give them a nice, deep drink every morning. And within 2 weeks, I'd be staring at a pile of mushy, translucent leaves and a black, rotting stem. It's a heartbreaking sight, especially when you've spent $40 or $50 on a low-maintenance dream that turned into a high-speed nightmare. But here is the thing I had to learn through trial and error. It wasn't that I didn't have a green thumb. It was that I didn't understand the biology of the desert camel. Today, we are going to break down exactly how these plants store water and why your kindness is often the very thing that kills them. By the time we are done, you'll know the 6 essential succulents for the American home and the secret to making them thrive in any USDA zone. Before we even hit the 1-minute mark, I want to give you a clear promise. If you can learn to read the skin of your plant, you will never lose a succulent to root rot again. We're going to start with a mini preview of our heavy hitters, the architectural agave and the medicinal aloe. But first, let's talk about the mistake that kills 90% of succulents in the first month. It's the showcase trap. When you buy a plant at a nursery, it's often pumped with high nitrogen fertilizer and kept in a greenhouse with 100% humidity. When you bring it to your dry backyard or your air-conditioned living room, the plant goes into shock. If you drown it during that shock period, it's game over. Let's start with our first plant, the echeveria. These are the darlings of the succulent world. They grow in those beautiful, tight rosettes that make them look like they belong in a fairy tale. They come from the mountain regions of Mexico and Central America, where they grow in rocky crevices. This is your first clue to their survival strategy. They aren't used to rich soil. They are used to grit. Their leaves are incredibly thick because they are essentially internal water tanks. If it doesn't rain for 3 months in the Mexican highlands, the echeveria just sips from its own leaves. This is why, when you feel the leaves of a healthy echeveria, they feel firm, almost like a piece of plastic. I remember my first real success with an echeveria Pearl von Nürnberg. It was this gorgeous, dusty purple color. I had it on my kitchen windowsill, and I decided to ignore it. I literally forgot it existed for 3 weeks. When I finally looked at it, the bottom leaves were starting to pucker and look a bit wrinkled, like my fingertips after a long soak in the tub. My instinct was to panic and soak it. But I realized that the plant was just telling me its tank was at 10%. I gave it a thorough watering until water ran out of the drainage hole, and by the next morning, the leaves were plump and firm again. That was my aha moment. The plant isn't a victim of the drought, it's a master of it. But here is the protector tip. What nobody tells you at the store is that the center of the rosette is its Achilles' heel. If you water from the top and a drop of water gets trapped in that little cup in the middle, it can cause heart rot. In the wild, these plants often grow at an angle on a cliffside so water runs off. In your flat pot at home, that water sits there, grows fungus, and kills the plant from the inside out. Always water the soil, not the leaves. Or better yet, use the bottom watering method. Set the pot in a tray of water for 15 minutes and let the soil wick up what it needs. This keeps the crown dry and the roots happy. Now, let's talk about light. Echeverias are sun worshippers. If you live in a condo or an apartment with only north-facing windows, you're going to struggle. Without enough light, the plant will undergo etiolation. It starts to stretch out, growing tall and skinny as it reaches for the sun. It loses that beautiful rose shape and becomes a leggy mess. If this happens to you, it's not your fault. It's just the plant's way of searching for food. You can actually reset the plant by cutting off the top and replanting it, but the best cure is prevention. Give it the brightest spot in your house, usually a south-facing window here in the US, or put it on your porch for the summer. Speaking of the porch, you have to be careful with the American summer. While they love sun, the afternoon heat in places like Texas, Arizona, or even a humid Georgia afternoon can actually sunburn the leaves. You'll see brown, crispy patches that never go away. I always recommend bright shade or morning sun for the best results. You want them to feel the warmth, not get fried by it. This balance of light and water is what turns a showcase plant into a lifelong companion. But what if you want something bigger? Something that can actually handle the ground in your backyard and act as a focal point for your entire landscape? That's where our next desert warrior comes in. This plant is the ultimate set it and forget it choice for a busy life, but there is one invisible habit most gardeners have that will turn this giant into a pile of black mush. You know why this happens even when you water correctly? I'll show you the reason in the next part. The reason even the toughest succulents can fail, even when you've mastered the watering can, usually comes down to the invisible trap, the soil density. I learned this the hard way with our second plant, the mighty agave. If the echeveria is a delicate rose, the agave is the tank of the succulent world. These are the spectacular, architectural plants you see in high-end desert landscapes or gracing the front of modern homes in Southern California and Florida. They have thick, fibrous leaves that can store enough water to survive a year of drought. But here is the mistake I made. I bought a beautiful, blue glow agave at a local nursery and planted it in standard, premium potting soil from a big box store. I thought I was doing the right thing by giving it the good stuff. But what nobody tells you at the store is that standard potting soil is designed to hold moisture, the exact opposite of what an agave wants. In the wild, agaves grow in rocky, sandy, poor soil, where water vanishes as soon as it hits the ground. My premium soil stayed wet for 10 days after a light rain, and my expensive agave literally melted from the bottom up. I felt like I'd thrown money in the trash. The validator here is simple. If this happened to you, it's not a lack of skill. You were sold soil meant for pansies, not for desert survivors. Now, I always mix my soil with 50% perlite or coarse sand. It should feel gritty, like a beach, not like a forest floor. When you have the right soil, the agave becomes your best friend. In USDA zones 8 through 11, these can live in the ground and handle the full, punishing American sun. They add incredible value to your curb appeal because they look expensive and deliberate. However, if you live in a colder climate, like zone 6 or 7, you have to treat them as container plants. A common enemy for the agave is the decorative pot. We often see them in those beautiful, glazed ceramic pots with no drainage hole at the bottom. The store sells them that way because they look clean, but it's a death sentence. Without a hole, the water collects at the bottom, creating a stagnant pool that rots the roots in 48 hours. If you love a pot without a hole, use it as a cache pot. Keep the plant in its plastic nursery liner and just set it inside the pretty one. Next on our list of camels is the sedum, specifically the upright autumn joy or the creeping stonecrop. These are the workhorses of the American suburban garden. I love sedums because they are one of the few succulents that can handle the freezing winters of the Midwest and the Northeast. They store water in their leaves just like the desert types, but they've adapted to the cold. They are the ultimate budget plant because they multiply so quickly. I started with one small pot of creeping lime green sedum, and 3 years later, it covers a 20-foot stretch of my garden path. The common mistake with sedum is over-fertilizing. We Americans love to feed our plants, but sedums are used to lean living. If you give them too much nitrogen, they get floppy. Instead of standing tall and proud, they'll split open in the middle and look like a mess. I tell my neighbors, starve them a little. They thrive on neglect. And if you have an area in your yard where the grass won't grow because it's too hot or the soil is too rocky, that is exactly where you should put your sedum. It will fill in the gaps and provide a carpet of green that requires 0 gallons of extra water once established. One thing to watch out for with both agaves and certain sedums is their physical presence. Agaves often have sharp teeth or a needle-like spine at the tip of each leaf. If you have dogs that love to chase balls in the backyard or grandkids running around, don't plant these near the edge of a walkway. I made the mistake of putting a century plant right by my porch steps, and I can't tell you how many times I poked my shin while carrying groceries. Move them to the back of the bed where they can be seen but not felt. And heads up, there's a simple mistake that makes our next plant, the beautiful, blooming Kalanchoe, stop flowering completely, even if the rest of the plant looks perfectly healthy. It's a trick of the light that most people never realize is happening inside their own homes. I'll show you how to avoid it in just a moment. The mistake that stops a Kalanchoe from blooming is actually a human one. We love our bright, well-lit American homes, but the Kalanchoe is a plant that demands the dark. You've seen these in the floral section of every grocery store, from Wegmans to Publix. They have those thick, waxy, scalloped leaves and clusters of vibrant flowers in neon pink, orange, or yellow. They are true succulents, storing massive amounts of water in those sturdy leaves, which is why they can sit on a store shelf for weeks without a drop of rain. But most people treat them like a bouquet of roses. They buy them, wait for the flowers to die, and when the plant stays green but never blooms again, they toss it. What nobody tells you at the store is that Kalanchoes are short-day plants. In the wild, they bloom when the days get shorter in the winter. At home, we keep our LED kitchen lights and floor lamps on until 11 p.m. That artificial light tricks the plant into thinking it's still summer, so it just keeps pumping out green leaves and zero flowers. I had one for 2 years that looked like a lush green bush, but not a single bud. I finally moved it to a guest bedroom that stays completely dark from 6 p.m. onwards. 6 weeks later, it was covered in more flowers than when I bought it. It wasn't a lack of fertilizer or a black thumb. It was just a misunderstanding of the plant's internal clock. If yours won't bloom, put it in a dark closet or a room you don't use at night for 14 hours a day. It's a simple adjustment that saves you from buying a new plant every season. Now, let's talk about a plant that looks like it belongs in an aquarium or a high-end boutique. The Burro's Tail, Sedum morganianum. These are those stunning trailing succulents with long, heavy tails of teardrop-shaped leaves. They are the ultimate vertical camel. They store so much water in those bead-like leaves that a mature plant can weigh 20 or 30 pounds just from the liquid stored inside. They look incredible in a hanging basket on a shaded porch or in a bright bathroom window. But here is the protector warning. This plant is the most fragile thing you will ever own. If you so much as sneeze near a Burro's Tail, 3 leaves will fall off. I remember buying a massive one from a local nursery. It was 3 feet long and beautiful. By the time I got it in my car and drove 10 miles home, half the leaves were in the trunk. I felt like I just destroyed a masterpiece. But here is the ally secret. Every single one of those fallen leaves is a potential new plant. This is the 10-second rule that will save you a fortune. In the succulent world, a leaf on the ground isn't trash. It's a seedling. If a leaf falls off your Burro's Tail or your echeveria, don't throw it away. Just lay it on top of some dry soil. Don't bury it, don't water it, and don't touch it. Within a few weeks, a tiny pink root will emerge and find the dirt, followed by a microscopic baby plant. This is how you multiply your garden for free while you sleep. In an apartment setting, the Burro's Tail is a champion because it handles the lower light levels of a porch or a bright indoor room better than the agaves do. However, you have to watch the humidity. If you live in a place like Houston or Miami where the air is thick enough to drink, your succulent soil will stay damp much longer. I tell my friends in the South, if you think it's time to water, go have a cup of coffee and wait 2 more days. These plants are built for the desert. They don't know how to handle a swamp in their pot. Another favorite for the American indoor gardener is the jade plant, Crassula ovata. These are often called money trees and are legendary for their longevity. I've seen jades that have been passed down in families for 40 years, growing into thick-trunked miniature trees. They store water in both their leaves and their woody stems. The biggest mistake people make with jades is putting them in a pot that's too big. Succulents like to be root-bound. They feel safer when their roots are snug. If you put a small jade in a giant pot, the soil stays wet too long, and the trunk will literally turn to mush and collapse. I lost my grandmother's jade because I thought I was doing her a favor by giving it a bigger home. It was a painful lesson in less is more. If you're a busy professional or a parent with zero extra time, these trailing and upright succulents are your best bet. They don't demand your attention every day, they just want a bright spot and to be left alone. But there is one plant that almost every American has in their home for its healing properties, yet we almost always grow it wrong. We treat it like a tropical houseplant when it's actually a desert survivor. The funny thing is, the problem is almost never the plant, it's the pot. I'll prove it in the next part.